Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. And this is going to be a list of the 7 publishers that I think do an incredible job of engaging with the community. Now, I'm going to go through this list, but before I do, and timestamps down below, and in case you want any spoilers, the 7 games on the table are going to be from those 7 publishers. Now, or just check the timestamp because I don't really do spoilers. But criteria for this list are pretty simple, which is it started with Awaken Realms. It started with just the idea of I see Awaken Realms as one of the most engaged publishers out there that doing one of the most amazing jobs at building and maintaining a community of people in a way that is incredible. For all my love of Come and I do love Come and if you see this, I'm sorry in advance. Sorry, I still like your games and you guys. But for all my love of Come Games, I do find that they are incredibly active in their Kickstarters, and the rest of the time, not so much. They kind of seem to be checking the box when it's most essential and relevant to do so, and the rest of the time they kind of do their own thing. And I'll defend many of the things they do, and I will defend them. I understand why they happen, but they don't have that degree of communication, engagement, and just community building that I see from other companies. And so Awaken Realms was the prompt for this list, and from there I just started trying to go through which publishers I see that I think just do an incredible job. That I don't know who sat there and told them that you should do X, Y, and Z, but whether it's instinct or whether it's courses or whatever they're doing, whether it's calculated or emotional, I don't care. They're checking the boxes and they're doing it in a way that really builds and maintains communities and do things well. And for those 7, the 7 is not to the exclusion of any other. They are going to specifically be Kickstarter focused to a degree. We have Stonemaier on the list, which is going to be the exception there. But they are Kickstarter focused to a degree, but they all have some form of engagement with their audience, with the people that buy and consume their games, that I think is admirable. And there may well be other people or companies who do the same. And if I miss them, by all means, post them in the comments down below because they'll probably end up on another list at some point. But my goal is not to exclude anyone. My goal is just that these were the 7 that came to my mind when I was crawling through the games I've backed, the companies that I've dealt with, and which ones stood out to me. Starting off the bat with the one that inspired it all is going to be Awaken Realms. Awaken Realms is incredible at this. I don't know if the rest of this list is not in any particular order, but I do think that for myself at least, Awaken Realms is the best standout by far on this list. They have Facebook pages for every single one of their games, Facebook pages that are actively maintained, that Marcin will show up Marcin, the CEO, the head of Awaken Realms, will show up and answer and engage in the community in a way that is ridiculous. People will tag him in something and he'll just be there. Like, he shouldn't have time for this. That's not, he's running multiple companies, doing them well. He's building up GameFound as an entity. It's the degree of which he should have no time for anyone is off the chart. And yet, he does have time for everyone, and he does make himself available in the groups, and he does sit there and, tease little things and engages in a way that feels like he is someone who's part of the community. It doesn't feel like he's unavailable. It feels like he's there. He has weekly live streams every single Monday, which is another way of engagement. Anyone who has a weekly live stream it had a decent chance of showing up on this list just by that alone, because they're engaging. They're taking the time to involve themselves with the community around them. And so he has those weekly live streams. They have the Facebook groups. They're amazing at replacement parts or handling any issues. Their community engagement before, during, and after campaigns is incredible. They have all the polls during every one of their campaigns, the polls that guide the direction of which alien race or whoever's going to show up. And then again, before, after, and before the campaign, there'll be posts about which box size, which box color do you want, which box art do you want. They really engage in the community. They understand that being separate from the community can take you places, but it will only take you so far. There's a degree of which you need to involve yourself in talking to the people who are buying the things you're selling, talking to the people who effectively love what you do. If you talk to them, you'll learn more. You'll do better. And Awaken Realms very much does better. Number 2 on this list is going to be Lucky Duck Games. That's going to be Mutants over here. For all of these, I had bigger boxes I could have used. I could have used for Super Fantasy Brawl, I could have used a giant box. I could have used Kingdom Rush for Mutants. But I also recognize that I want to fit these all on camera, so I didn't. Mutants by Lucky Duck Games. Lucky Duck Games also, they have consistent, regular live streams. More gameplay. Oz is going to be the current face of, actually, interestingly enough, Oz used to work for Mythic. Now he works for Lucky Duck, so both companies on this list. But and I believe the Mythic thing was that they closed down their London branch or their England branch or something like that. Don't know exactly the details, but that's irrelevant here. But Az is going to be on Facebook and, doing regular gameplay live streams of whatever game is currently the hotness of Lucky Duck. They engaged. I remember I did a whole video devoted to them at one point, specifically because when they were doing both Chronicles of Crime and Kingdom Rush, They basically had a whole conversation with their audience where they said, hey, we've committed to giving you the games first, but here's the whole situation and delays and this, and it would be very helpful to us as a company if we could do X, Y, and Z. And they asked people, and they said, we're going to go with whatever people ultimately go with. And it's a complicated thing, because with a conversation like that, you're inherently going to end up with a few people who don't want you to do something, which means to a certain extent you're going to make others a little bit unhappy regardless. But they ultimately went with what their audience wanted. They asked people, rather than just saying, oh, games available at retail earlier, tough noogies, which is what so many companies would do. It's not even that crazy for it to happen. You talk about delays, you talk about core box, you put a few updates out, it's easy to explain it away, and it's easy to have people grumble and move on, and they didn't do that. They engaged, and they do that in their campaigns as well. Their campaigns also, they have the whole before and after, and doing their campaigns of being involved in the community, asking them questions, polling them for the changes they want. Lucky Duck Games is one that wasn't on my radar a while ago, but I would say over the past year, I mean, they were on my radar as a publisher, they had games, but I would say over the past year, the level of engagement they've had, either I've just started noticing it, or it's grown, because I feel they went from not really on my radar in terms of this kind of conversation to very much on my radar as a publisher that I think cares about the community that they are building. Number 3 is going to be Chip Theory Games. And Chip Theory Games is an interesting one, and I think they're an interesting one for a variety of reasons. But to begin with, one of the things that stands out most to me is they are incredibly good at spontaneously giving when people seem to need it. They'll see these posts on random Facebook groups, if someone will say like, oh, my collection just got lost in a freak fire or this, that, whatever, and they'll be like, oh, give us your address, we'll send you too many bones. They'll do this they've done this frequently enough that I've seen it happen as a repeat thing, where they offer to just send games to people to make them feel better because something got in the way of making them feel better. They don't have to do that. It's insanity. Their games are expensive. They do charge a decent amount for their games. And yet when someone's hurting, when someone's in pain, they often use that that thing they make and sell, they use that commodity to bring joy to others in a way that is inspiring and unasked for and welcomed by both those who actually get the game as well as those who see it, effectively seeing a visible act of goodwill. Now, obviously it helps their perception of the company, but it's just so nice to see. It's a solid thing. And then they'll also have regular, I don't think they have weekly live streams, but they also engage with their audience with consistent, again, not weekly, but consistent live streams covering their games, whether it's around Kickstarters or not. And again, they do this whole thing as well where randomly in the middle of a live stream, they'll be like, oh, and just because you guys were here, here's a game here or there. I mean, they'll throw in those giveaways. They are very much into the general idea of spontaneous moments of excitement to help people feel excited to be a part of that. And their parts replacement service in general is incredible. And the reason I care about parts replacement, I mentioned it Awaken Realms, I mentioned it by Chip 3, and I'm going to mention it by a few others. The reason I care about any company who has a solid degree of just any parts issues they'll help you out with is because it shows they care about their products and their customers far more than the fact that they can loop somebody into buying a full extra copy of a game because they lost the player boards or something like that. So any company that takes a stance of sending out parts when people are missing them. And it costs money, by the way. Again, we'll talk about this more by Stonemaier, but like it costs a ton of money to run a viable parts replacement sub-aspect of your company. And so when a company does it, it means they're giving up money because they care about their games and their customer lifetime enjoyment as opposed to just getting that next sale in. Number 4 is going to be Orange Nebula. Now, Orange Nebula is a bit of an interesting one as well because like they're a marketing agency, effectively. They're a marketing agency that built out a games division of their company. And they have, so far to date, they've done Vindication, they've done Unsettled, which hasn't hit yet, and then they have a rumor or spoiler of something potentially upcoming soon without any clear details whatsoever. But Orange Nebula, they have an incredibly active Facebook group. They do a great job as well at that community engagement of that. They don't really do live streams as much. Doing their campaigns they do, but the rest of the time I haven't seen it that much. But like Tom is so active in every single group that he's in. If you tag him in anything, he'll show up. He's talking about games. He's just sharing random things into the groups. He treats the group of Orange Nebula fans as a general community of people that we're all friends with together. And I think that's excellent for that. When you don't just have a community, but you are in the community, it really puts a face to the name. It really grounds both the publisher as well as the people around them. It makes it much easier. They also have like incredibly focused games. They've done Vindication campaigns 3 times now, which means they've been able to build up an entire games company around a single title, basically. I mean, they have Unsettled as well, but hasn't even hit yet. they're running on one single game, a game that is well loved, but a game they keep doubling down on, improving and making better and adding to it. Instead of just going wide, they're going deep on a game system. And Nebula, I think, does a tremendous job of that general community engagement. Number 5. Number 5 is going to be IV Games. IV Games from Moonrakers and Veiled Fate. Now, they're an interesting one as well because they also have definitely shifted up. When I first put together this list a while ago, this is a video I was going to do around 3 months ago. I remember asking my patrons for ideas for any companies I may have left out. And back then, there was going to be 5 publishers because that's all I had. And IV Games got added to the list since then. I don't remember which one I added other than that. But I added IV Games to the list since then because at the time, they were solid. I had no issues with them. But they also didn't have the degree of community engagement or any specific aspect of this that goes towards that. They had IV Games Weekly, which is a weekly video on YouTube. They have a channel where they just talk about their games, their company. They're incredibly transparent, which I love. They have one particular episode where they broke down all the numbers that went into Moonrakers of, all the money they raised in the Kickstarter campaign, all the funds, the salaries, the marketing, all those expenses, the cost of goods, all that, and then broke out what it was made. They were incredibly transparent, which I value, and it also makes you look at any campaign that does $300,000 and makes you wonder how they made any money. But yeah, I love the transparency and I love their Ivy Weekly series. But in addition to that, they've also recently added 4 new YouTube series. They're doubling down on that community engagement. They're doubling down the aspect of we're not just someone who makes games, we're someone who wants to be a voice within the community, and we want to have that transparency. And the live streams, most of their videos are all live streams, so people can jump in, comment, and all that. Speaking of someone who does daily videos, doing live streams is an extra step, an extra hurdle that adds an annoyance and frustration and tech issues that there's a reason I only do them once a month as opposed to my videos, which I do at this point several times a day sometimes. But yeah, I appreciate what Ivy Games is currently doing, and also Veiled Fate. Veiled Fate, mid-Kickstarter, they pivoted and they added a new tier to make things cheaper for people. They added a full new option. That's not something that's easy or cheap to do. And I remember I did a video with Austin from Ivy Games back then, covering the numbers and showing how, unless they were hoping for something magical, this was clearly not a move that was going to make them money. This was a move they were doing that was going to lose them some margins and was done to accommodate others. I broke down the math with them in that episode, but unless they were hoping for a crazy amount of new backers, it just made no sense to do so. So yeah, they were willing to bite into their own bottom line to make their backers happy, which I value. Number 6 is going to be Stonemaier Games. Stonemaier Games is going to have, a variety of things. I think they're the only non-Kickstarter person on the company on this list. Although companies are people. They're not people, but they're made up of people. So when I say person or company, they're interchangeable. These are all, what's the largest company you can think of in the board game space? It's still going to be a handful of people. It's just they're people behind the companies, and we forget that sometimes when we jump on a page and we start posting, your Kickstarter's late and you're the worst and I hope you all die. And I've seen screenshots from disgruntled backers saying, I hope you die. It's one specific one. I hope your mother and siblings all die in a horrible car accident because their Kickstarter came with damaged parts. Mind-boggling. Not the point of this video. Mind-boggling. It's amazing what a little bit of plastic and cardboard can do to threaten humans' lives. And then write it off as, well, they're just a company. They should have done better. They're mind-boggling. Anyways, back to Stonemaier. Sorry for the dark turn over there. Stonemaier Games is going to be one that, this is run by Jamie Stonemaier, obviously, and he has a weekly live stream every single week. Again, anyone who runs a weekly live stream was already I was looking at for this video, and I particularly enjoy his. And additionally, he has what I consider to be the single best newsletter in the entire gaming ecosystem. Now, I'm biased because the type of content he's putting out is very much the type of content I like. So I say it's the single best one out there, but you may not actually enjoy it the same way I do, because it's very much industry stuff. It's stuff like just conversational things about, he has a post of what people would have done if they were Stonemaier CEO for a day. He asked people what they would have done if they were making the calling the shots. And then he tackled most of those in terms of either why they're not or adding it to a list of things to examine. That's incredible. He's incredibly transparent about his numbers in general, but Stonemaier Game and all their numbers, how much they're selling, what they're doing. He's also done an incredible amount of things for the BIPOC community in terms of they're transparent with their initiatives of how they're supporting creators, how they're supporting content creators, designers, and being involved in that space. He puts out pieces that are just industry things about Kickstarter stuff, like what happens if you bundle two games into a single Kickstarter. Is that good or not good? And I'll talk about it. These are the types of conversations I love because I love approaching things from an aspect of what makes sense. And all his content, most of his newsletters, are basically looking at something that's currently relevant and then saying what makes sense. And he'll bring in guest people to talk about things if they're relevant to the subject matter, or he'll talk about it himself. But they're incredibly solid newsletters that I think are are just value added to anyone who's making a game, designing a game, thinking of being on Kickstarter. He's adding so much value to the space for free. And then the parts replacement, they have a full division. This goes back to the whole transparency thing. He had a whole post once when Asmodee switched their policy about parts. He had a newsletter post about the aspect, why they would do that, how it makes sense, the cost of doing it, and also why Stonemaier Games is not going to still do that, meaning they're still going to give parts out in terms of when people need them. It is expensive to support that, but he believes in supporting the general games, the general games, the lifetime cycle of the customer, all that. And then interviews. He does interviews with anyone. Like anyone who will ask for his time, he will sit down and talk to you. He has a blog, he has a newsletter post about why people should always accept interviews with anyone. But he does that. He's so involved in this space. He's so present. He's so public. And there's a reason why Stonemaier Games gets so much hype every single time that they are announced. And they do a solid job. And so that's why Stonemaier Games is my number 6. And then lastly, process elimination, we have Mythic Games as my number 7 on this list. And Mythic Games, again, they're going to have a weekly Q&A, a weekly live stream with Leo, where they on Facebook and on YouTube, people can ask questions and they'll talk about things. And again, anyone who did a weekly Q&A, anyone who's giving up their time weekly to engage with their audience, I think is a huge thing. I think it's tremendous. Additionally to that, they are one of the most consistent publishers that I know, if not the most consistent, in terms of they have their Wednesday updates for every single one of their Kickstarters on a consistent basis. I love that. I don't read half of them, but I love that. I love how they are going to give you an update and news no matter what, whether there's something to talk about or not. They don't just leave you hanging for 2 months while you wonder what's going on. They'll post something, anything, whatever it is, the Wednesday What's Up or something, I don't even know what they call it. But they have weekly updates on every single one of their Kickstarter. They have their issues with like their rules and their RAD, and they're slowly getting better at that. Hopefully they're slowly getting better at it. They have issues with the production of rushing things out. But in terms of their community engagement, they are incredibly solid in the way they engage with people, in the way they engage with their backers, their fans, their audience. And that's why they're on this list. That's my 7. Those are the 7 companies that I think do a tremendous job engaging and building community. They are not just there for the money, the bottom line. I mean, they might be, by the way. I have no problem with that. But whether they are or aren't, they don't come across as it. And I think that matters. Obviously, at the end of the day, any company is trying to, any of us for that matter, we're just trying to get by. We're trying to do what we need to do to make things work. But there's a way to do it while stepping on people, and there's a way to do it while building friends and community. And I think building friends and community is a better way to go about it. That's my list. Let me know who I missed. Who did I not think of that also does a tremendous job building community? There were definitely a few other candidates that I thought of, but I needed at least 2 or 3 points that I could point to as to why they were worthy of including here before I put them there. So a single thing likely won't do it. But that being said, let me know what I'm missing out on. Which passionate audience, which audience that cares about its fans, that is given to their fans, that has spent time with them, whatever it is. Let me know who I missed. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.